The region of Beth Garmai in northern Iraq, bounded by the Little Zab and Diyala rivers and centered on the town of Karka. Beth Slokh was a metropolitan province of the Church of the East between the 5th and 14th centuries. Several bishops and metropolitans of Beth Garmai are mentioned between the 4th and 14th centuries, residing first at Shahrgard, then at Karka. Beth Slokh, later at Shahrzur, and finally at Daquqa. The known suffragan dioceses of the metropolitan province of Beth Garmai included Shahrgard, Lashom, Khanijar, Mahoze, Radani, Hrbath Glal, Tahal and Shahrzur. The suffragan dioceses of Darabad and al-Qabba, mentioned respectively by Eliya of Damascus and Mari, are probably to be identified with one or more of these known dioceses. The diocese of Garka, attested in the 8th and 9th centuries, may also have been a suffragan diocese of the province of Beth Garmai. The last known metropolitan of Beth Garmai is attested in the 13th century, and the last known bishop in 1318, though the historian Amra continued to describe Beth Garmai as a metropolitan province as late as 1348. It is not clear when the province ceased to exist, but the campaigns of Timur-Lenk between 1390 and 1405 offer a reasonable context. Background: before the 14th century, the Kirkuk region was included in the East Syrian metropolitan province of Beth Garmai, one of the 5 great provinces of the interior of the Church of the East. The Bishop of Karka. Beth Slokh was recognized as metropolitan of Beth Garmai in Canon 21 of the Synod of Isaac in 410. He ranked 6th in precedence, and was responsible for the suffragan dioceses of Shahrgard, Lashom, Radani and Hrbath Glal. There were several suffragan dioceses in the province of Beth Garmai at different periods. Within Beth Garmai itself there were dioceses for Radani, Shahrgard, Lashom, Shahrzur and Tiran. All of these dioceses except Tiran were in the province of Beth Garmai. The dioceses of Hrbath Glal and Mahoze in the Lesser Zab Valley were geographically in the Erbil region but seem to have been included in the metropolitan province of Beth Garmai. The seat of the bishops of Mahoze was later transferred to the nearby town of Khanijar, also known as Beth Wazi, and this diocese still had a bishop in 1318. Within the Beth Garmai region proper, however, only the metropolitan diocese of Daquqa and the diocese of Tiran in the province of the Patriarch seem to have survived into the 14th century. The last known bishop of Tiran, Shimon, was present at the consecration of Timothy II in 1318, and the diocese may have met its end during Timur's campaigns in the 1390s. No further bishops are recorded in the Kirkuk region until the early years of the 19th century, when a Catholic diocese of Kirkuk was established in the 1820s by the patriarchal administrator Augustine Hindi. Later in the 19th century a second Catholic diocese was established for the Sena region in Persia, hitherto part of the Diocese of Kirkuk. Eliya of Damascus listed 5 suffragan dioceses in the Eparchy of Bayami in 893, in the following order: Shahrgard, Daquqa, al-Bawazuk, Darabad, and Khanijar and Lashom. The diocese of al-Qabba, in the province of Beth Garmai, not attested elsewhere, is said to have been added to Wasit during the reign of the Patriarch Abdushawan, in exchange for the diocese of al-Bawazuk. The diocese of Karka. Beth Slokh. The Bishop Yohanan of Beth Garmai was present at the Concile of Nicaea in 325. The bishops Shapur and Isaac of Beth Garmai are mentioned in connection with the persecution of Shapur II. The Bishop Akbar, Bishop of Karka and Metropolitan of Beth Garmai, was present at the Synod of Isaac in 410 and subscribed to its acts. He was also among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Dardasho in 424. The Bishop Yohanan, Bishop of Karka-D Beth Slokh, Metropolitan of Beth Garmai, was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Acacius in 486. The Deacon and Secretary Hormeetst was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Babai in 497. On behalf of the Metropolitan Daquqa of Beth Garmai, the Bishop Diyala of Karka-D Beth Slokh, Metropolitan of this town and of all the country of Beth Garmai, was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Marabarai in 544. The Metropolitan al-Qabba of Beth Garmai adhered by letter to the Acts of the Synod of Joseph in 554. The Metropolitan Daquqa of Beth Garmai adhered by letter to the Acts of the Synod of Yhbi in 585. The Metropolitan Daquqa of Beth Garmai, perhaps the same man, was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Gregory in 605. The monk Gabriel of the monastery of Beth was consecrated Metropolitan of Beth Garmai by the Patriarch Hrbath. Originally from Nisibis, he was surnamed Rakoda, the dancer, on account of his effeminate gait. The monk Hrbath of the monastery of Beth was elected Metropolitan Bishop of Karka-D Beth Slokh at an unknown date in the second half of the 8th century of the first half of the 9th century. The Metropolitan Theodore of Beth Garmai was present at the consecration of the Patriarch Yohanan IV in 900. The Metropolitan Hrbath of Beth Garmai was one of 3 bishops who went into hiding in 961 in protest against the election of the Patriarch Israel. The Metropolitan Nestorius of Beth Garmai was present at the consecration of the Patriarch Mari on the 10th of April 987. The Metropolitan Shemon, originally Bishop of Beth Dara and later Bishop of Kashgar, was Metropolitan of Beth Garmai when Eliya bar Shana completed his chronography in 1018/19. The Metropolitan Hrbath of Beth Garmai was present at the consecration of the Patriarch Abdasho II in 1074. The Bishop David ibn Basaha of Hrbath Glal was consecrated Metropolitan of Beth Garmai by the Patriarch Abdasho II shortly after his own consecration in 1074. The Bishop Thomas, formerly Metropolitan of Ilam, was consecrated Metropolitan of Beth Garmai during the reign of the Patriarch Eliya II. The Patriarch Abdasho III ibn al-Mutli was Metropolitan of Beth Garmai before his consecration as Patriarch in 1139, and was present as Metropolitan of Beth Garmai at the consecration of the Patriarch Basorma in 1134. The Metropolitan Eliya of Beth Garmai was present at the consecration of the Patriarch Hrbath II in 1190. The Patriarch Sabrishov was Metropolitan of Beth Garmai before his consecration as Patriarch in 1226. He was present as Metropolitan of Daquqa at the consecration of the Patriarch Sabrisho IV in 1222. The Metropolitan Eliya of Beth Garmai was present at the consecration of the Patriarch Dena I in 1265. The Metropolitan Eliya of Beth Garmai, possibly the same man, was present at the consecration of the Patriarch Hrbath III in 1281. The Bishop Shemon of Beth Garmai was present at the consecration of the Patriarch Timothy II in 1318. The Diocese of Shahrgard. The Bishop Paul of Shahrgard was confirmed as a suffragan bishop of the Metropolitan al-Qabba of Beth Garmai in Canon 21 of the Synod of Isaac in 410. The Bishop Paul of Shahrgard was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Babai in 497. The Bishop Abraham of Shahrgard was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Marabarai in 544. The Bishop Belshazzar of Shahrgard was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Ezekiel in 576. The Bishops Uran of Shahrgard was among the signatories of the agreement agreement of Daquqa.The in March 598 and the Acts of the Synod of Gregory in 605. The Bishop Abraham of Shahrgard was present at the consecration of the Patriarch Yohanan IV in 900. The Bishop Abraham, metropolitan of Mishan when Eliya bar Shana completed his chronography in 1018 19th, was formerly Bishop of Shahrgard, the Diocese of Lashom. The town of Lashom was situated 9 hours to the south of Kirkuk, close to the town of Daquqa, which had replaced Karka.The Beth Slokh as the seat of the metropolitans of Beth Garmaï by the 13th century. Wallace Budge has identified Lashom with the village of Lashom, 3/4 of a mile to the southwest of Daquqa. The Bishop Barta of Lashom was confirmed as a suffragan bishop of the metropolitan al-Qabba of Beth Garmai in Canon 21 of the Synod of Isaac in 410. He was also among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Dardasho in 424. The Bishop Micah of Lashom was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Acacius in 486. He was among the many Persian bishops educated at the school of Edessa before its closure in 489, and is said to have written a commentary on Iron 2 Kings, a discourse on his predecessor Sabrisho, another on a person named Cantropos, and a tract explaining the division of the Nestorian Psalter into 3 sections. The Bishop Abraham of Lashom was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Babai in 497. The Bishop Joseph of Lashom was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Marabarai in 544. The Bishop Saba of Lashom was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Ezekiel in 576. The Bishop Sabrisho of Lashom adhered by letter to the Acts of the Synod of Isho-Yhbi in 585. The Bishop Ahishma of Lashom was among the signatories of the agreement of Daquqa.The in March 598. The Patriarch Nanasho II was Bishop of Lashom before his election and consecration as Patriarch in 776 7th. The Bishop Marcos of Lashom was present at the consecration of the Patriarch Yohanan IV in 900. The Diocese of Khanijar. The Patriarch Yohanan III was earlier Bishop of Khanijar, and was transferred from Khanijar to the Metropolitan Diocese of Mosul during the reign of the Patriarch Enosh. The Diocese of Mahoze. The Bishop Yohanan of Ariwan was confirmed as a suffragan bishop of the Metropolitan al-Qabba of Beth Garmai in Canon 21 of the Synod of Isaac, in 410. The Bishop Adai of Ariwan Abra was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Dardasho in 424. The Bishop Papa of Ariwan was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Acacius in 486. The Bishop Nasio of Mahoze was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Joseph in 554. The Bishop Samuel of Mahoze was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Ezekiel in 576. The Bishop Karmasho of Mahoze was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Isho-Yhbi in 585. The Bishop Nanya of Mahoze was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Gregory in 605. The monk Sardona of the monastery of Beth Abe, an eminent East Syrian scholar and Bishop of Mahoze, whose defection to the West Syrian Church was a source of considerable embarrassment to the Church of the East, the Diocese of Radani. The Bishop Nasai of Radani was confirmed as a suffragan bishop of the Metropolitan al-Qabba of Beth Garmai in Canon 21 of the Synod of Isaac in 410. He was also among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Dardasho in 424. The diocese of Hrbath Glal, the Bishop Joseph of Hrbath Glal was confirmed as a suffragan bishop of the metropolitan al-Qabba of Beth Garmaï in Canon 21 of the Synod of Isaac in 410. He was also among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Lashom in 424. The Bishop Buzzard of Hrbath Glal was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Acacius in 486. The Bishop Hrbath of Hrbath Glal was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Babai in 497. The Bishop Daquqa of Hrbath Glal was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Hrbath in 544. The Bishop Gabriel of Hrbath Glal adhered by letter to the Acts of the Synod of Joseph in 554. The Bishop Nana of Hrbath Glal was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Ezekiel in 576. The Bishop Gabriel of Hrbath Glal was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synods of Hrbath in 585 and Gregory in 605. An unnamed bishop was consecrated for Hrbath Glal by the Patriarch Sabrisho III shortly after his own consecration in 1063 quarters. The Bishop David ibn Basaha of Hrbath Glal was consecrated Metropolitan of Beth Garmai by the Patriarch Abdasho II shortly after his own consecration in 1074. The Diocese of Tahal. The Bishop Bahili of Tahal was one of 11 named bishops listed in the Acts of the Synod of Dardasho in 424 as having been reproved at the Synods of Isaac in 410 and Yabul in 420. The Bishop Abraham of Tahal was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synods of Acacius in 486 and Babai in 497. The Bishop Marutha of Tahal was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Marabarai in 544. The Bishop Shubhalasho of Tahal was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Ezekiel in 576. The Bishop Boktyartst of Tahal was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Ishoyhbi in 585. The Bishop Kasher of Tahal was among the signatories of the Agreement of Daquqa.The in March 598. The Bishop Peroz of Tahal was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Gregory in 605. The Bishop Abda of Tahal was present at the consecration of the Patriarch Yohanan IV in 900. The Diocese of Shahrzur. The Bishop Tamin of Shahrzur was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synod of Joseph in 554. The Bishop Nathaniel of Shahrzur was among the signatories of the Acts of the Synods of Ishoyhbi in 585 and Gregory in 605. The Bishop Isaac of Shahrzur was present at the consecration of the Patriarch Yohanan IV in 900. The Bishop Abraham of Shahrzur was appointed Metropolitan of Mishan during the reign of the Patriarch Mari, after the death of the Metropolitan Joseph. The Diocese of Gorgai. The Bishop Yohanan of Gorgai, a town in Beth Garmai, was among the bishops who witnessed a retraction of the Messalian heresy made by the priest Nestorius of the monastery of Mahoze in 790. Before his consecration as Bishop of Beth Nuhadra, the Bishop Hakima of Gorgai was a contemporary of Thomas of Marga and flourished around the middle of the 9th century. Bishops of unspecified dioceses. The monks Berdisho, Kyriakos, Babanisho of the monastery of Beth Abe were bishops of various dioceses in the province of Beth Garmai at an unknown date in the second half of the 8th century of the first half of the 9th century. Topographical survey. The Beth Garmai region seems to have been at its most flourishing in the 6th and 7th centuries. A number of its towns, villages and monasteries, many unlocalized, are mentioned in several pre-14th century sources, notably Thomas of Marg's Book of Governors and Nisho-Dinar's Book of Chastity. These sources mention the districts of Beth Shanani, Beth Garmaï, Hassa and Risha, the towns of Karka-The, Beth Slokh, Daquqa, Lashom, Khanijar and Karka, the monasteries of Hrbath and Mahoze near Daquqa, and the villages of Hrbath Glal, Shahrgard and Zarq. Few of these communities are mentioned after the 11th century, and only two seem to have survived into the 14th century. The celebrated monastery of Mahoze near the town of Daquqa was visited by the monks Hrbath Glal and Mahoze in 1280, and is almost certainly to be identified with the monastery of Mahoze in the region of Babylon, mentioned in the report of 1610. And East Syrian community seems also to have survived in Kirkuk itself, next mentioned in the 16th century. Isolated East Syrian communities also persisted around Sana, a rare survival beyond the Urmi region of historic East Syrian Christianity in Persia, and in Baghdad, once the seat of the East Syrian patriarchs. Towards the end of the 18th century, the historic diocese of Beth Garmai was revived with the establishment of the Chaldean diocese of Kirkuk in 1789. For much of the 19th century, the East Syrian communities of Sana and Baghdad were included in the Chaldean diocese of Kirkuk.